This is Atomic Biscuits, and I'm your host, BACFA. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Atomic Biscuits. This is episode 2025-0525-CBC. We're going to start this week over at theblaze.com. Eric Swalwell calls for escalation after fellow Democrat faces charges for allegedly assaulting ICE officer by Rebecca Zlechko. A red line has been crossed. Democrat Representative Eric Swalwell, swallows well, fang fam, California, called for other lawmakers to go one rung higher after his colleague Democrat Representative LaMonica McIver of New Jersey was charged for allegedly assaulting an officer at a ICE detention center. Alina Habba, the interim U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey, announced the charges against McIver on Monday, saying she assaulted, impeded, and interfered with law enforcement. Although McIver can be seen apparently shoving law enforcement on camera, she maintains that the charges against her are purely political. And that's over at theblaze.com. And I'm sure we can expect lots more from the Democrats as the summer heats up. Over at dailycaller.com, Soros-backed Philadelphia DA wins key primary race after presiding over record-high murders. This is by Hudson Crozier. Democratic Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner won the Democratic primary election on Tuesday, all but guaranteeing that he will secure another 4 years in office, according to the Associated Press. Krasner defeated challenger Pat Dugan in the primary race for District Attorney of Philadelphia, according to the AP. No Republican is running for District Attorney in the November general election, and Krasner's primary win means he will likely carry the general election in deep blue Philadelphia. Dugan, a U.S. Army veteran and former Philadelphia Municipal Court judge, framed his campaign around a push to prioritize victims and punish criminals. His campaign website says that violent offenders will face the maximum penalties allowed by law, and that repeat offenders will pay for their crimes. Krasner won the 2017 Democratic primary for District Attorney after a pro-Krasner super PAC received $1.45 million from left-wing philanthropist George Soros. Krasner has focused through his 2 terms on left-wing reforms to the justice system since taking office in 2018. We reduced the number of years of incarceration imposed by an estimated 40,000 years from 2018 to 2023, the website for Krasner's office boasts. Reducing mass incarceration can make our city safer. Additionally, Krasner highlighted recent decreases in crime at the city level as a central campaign pitch. Police data indicates that homicides reported in Philadelphia were lower in 2024 by several dozen relative to when he took office in 2018. However, those numbers followed homicides spiking to an all-time high of more than 550 in 2021 under Krasner. Early numbers for 2025 show mixed trends, with murders, robberies using guns, and aggravated assaults using guns rising by double-digit percentage points over the past 2 28-day periods. Other violent offenses have gone down, and most are lower in the same period from January to May in 2024. Krasner told Axios he wanted to totally eliminate cash bail if reelected, though he said existing state law keeps him from enacting the most effective version of bail reform. Krasner also already ended cash bail for a majority of crimes that were occurring in his district, arguing it's unfair to imprison people for poverty. Expanding diversionary programs that allows offenders to avoid punishment was another top priority for Krasner. Criticism of Krasner became so widespread that state legislators passed a bipartisan law in 2023, giving some of Krasner's authority to a new prosecutor position for Philadelphia's public transit system. Supporters of the law said it was needed because Krasner is too soft on crime. The district attorney also said he supports local officials refusing to assist deportation efforts by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That's ICE. My office will not be commandeered by an out-of-control Trump administration, Krasner told Axios about ICE agents trying to break the law. Philadelphia has been a sanctuary city, restricting local police cooperation with ICE since 2016. Krasner's office has given free legal help to illegal migrants facing removal for rape, robbery, assault, and other serious crimes, the Daily Caller News Foundation previously reported. Krasner also drew criticism for starting a policy in 2018 to give shoplifters summary offenses, usually similar to a ticket, instead of jail time, unless they steal more than $500. Retail thefts, arrests skyrocketed in 2024 to levels higher than any year on record through Krasner's tenure, and he changed the policy in March to make jail time more likely for organized or repeat shoplifters. And that's where that ends on Daily Caller. Of course, that's exactly what you get. Hey, let's make it easier for people to shoplift up to $499 without going to jail. What's going to happen to those vendors who are trying to sell their wares? They're going to close up shop and they're going to move out of there. And Philadelphia is not going to be a place where people are going to want to go buy their sundries. I don't know why Democrats can't see around the corner a little bit on these policies. They have natural ends, and it shows just how wrong they often are. As Reagan would say, so much they know just isn't so. I saw some video where someone was saying, look, they cloned Kevin Spacey. I don't really know what they did to Kevin Spacey. It almost looks like somebody in a mask or someone who is 10 years older than Kevin Spacey, who's been made up to look like Kevin. I mean, he's almost unrecognizable. Even glasses and hairline, ears, nothing looks right. Or maybe it's just once you remove the Hollywood magic, these people look rough. I don't know. But over at NPR.org, they had this article, nice to be back, Kevin Spacey says, accepting Achievement Award at Cannes. This is my Mandalit Debaco. Kevin Spacey's facing new sexual assault allegations in the UK. He was honored at a benefit gala in Cannes, France, which is currently hosting its prestigious film festival. Spacey's appearance raised eyebrows, but he was warmly greeted during a photo shoot. As reported by AFP, Spacey told the media before the event, I feel surrounded by so much affection and love. I've heard from so many of my friends and colleagues and co-stars in the last week since this award was announced, he added. It's very nice to be back. When asked if this was the beginning of a comeback for him, Spacey was quoted as saying, I'm glad to be working, I'll tell you that. While it's not directly associated with the festival, the Better World Fund Gala took place Tuesday night at the Carlton Hotel, one of the festival's premier sites. The Better World Fund supports cinema and art at the service of humanity, focusing on women's rights, gender equality, and education. Previous galas honored actors Kevin Costner, Susan Sarandon, and Sharon Stone. This year, it celebrated Spacey's lifetime achievements, including Academy Awards for The Usual Suspects in 1995 and American Beauty 1999, and his roles in Seven 1995 and House of Cards 2013 to 2018. Kevin's extraordinary contributions to the art of cinema have left a mark on audiences and filmmakers alike. Manuel Cala de la Roche, the president and founder of the Better World Fund, said in a statement, his talent, depth, and commitment to storytelling exemplify the transformative power of film. It is with great excitement that we celebrate his legacy and presence at this meaningful gathering. This is just the latest Lifetime Achievement Award for the 65-year-old has received since his acting career was derailed by a number of sexual misconduct allegations and trials. Since 2017, more than 30 men have accused Spacey of sexual assault or inappropriate behavior, including actor Guy Pearce, who claims Spacey behaved inappropriately toward him on the set of the 1997 film LA Confidential. On X, Spacey posted a video telling Pierce to grow up, you are not a victim. In 2018, Spacey faced felony charges of indecent assault and battery against an 18-year-old man, though prosecutors dropped the case after the witness stopped testifying. Actor Anthony Rapp claimed he was 14 when Spacey molested him. In 2020, Rapp sued him for $40 million in damages in a civil court, but 2 years later, a jury found Spacey not liable. After that, Netflix fired Spacey from his role on the hit series House of Cards, and Ridley Scott replaced him with another actor in the film All the Money in the World. Following year in London, Spacey was acquitted of multiple counts of sexual assault and indecent assault incidents in the UK that dated back to the period between 2001 and 2013, when Spacey served as the artistic director of London's Old Vic Theatre. In February of this year, actor Rory Cannon filed a civil lawsuit at London's High Court against Spacey and the Old Vic, although details have not yet been revealed. In recent years, Spacey has quietly returned to acting, mostly in Italian films, including a role as the devil in the 2024 thriller The Contract. His trip to Cannes and the Better World Fund Award were organized by producers of the British independent film The Awakening, described by Camelot Films as a conspiracy action thriller. Producers from the production company are at Cannes to sell the film and brought Spacey to meet with potential buyers. Camelot Films is one of the sponsors of the Better World Gala Fund. Spacey's appearance during the Cannes Film Festival came as Cannes officials declared French actor Théo Navarre-Moussi a persona non grata on the Promenade des Croisades. The 34-year-old actor faces rape allegations against him from 3 of his former partners. The complaints were dismissed for lack of evidence, but they reportedly plan to file a new complaint. The festival's opening was marred by the sexual assault conviction of one of France's most iconic cinematic figures, Gérard Depardieu. And that lengthy, not very specific article is from NPR.org. I think that they really put a glossy coat on what has been a kind of a nasty set of stories around Spacey. There is more, so much more to the Spacey story and where he's been and whose thrones he's sat upon and just how he fits into some of the worst of the sexual predating world traffickers, I should say, that we know of. And the fact that NPR doesn't go there tells you a lot about who writes their checks. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes I have to stop short because I realize this was broadcast across the world over the airwaves, and we have to be pretty specific with allegations and subtlety, right? Some of these things are easy for you to find. Maybe I can't say them on the radio, but you can know where to look. Over at AM Greatness, American Greatness, the website has this story, Tulsi on Fauci's role in funding COVID pandemic. Is it any wonder he sought a preemptive pardon? Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, told Megyn Kelly that one reason Dr. Anthony Fauci sought a preemptive pardon before Joe Biden left the White House is because he lied under oath about helping fund the COVID-19 pandemic. Gabbard recounted the numerous times that Fauci denied providing funding for gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, WIV, while being questioned under oath by Senator Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky. So is it any wonder that he sought a preemptive pardon for anything during a certain period of time by President Biden before he left office? Gabbard asked on Twitter X. In the 5 years since the pandemic first began, the official story that the SARS-CoV-2 virus originated in a Wuhan wet market has been gradually walked back by members of the media, the intelligence community, and the government. The most likely origin of the virus, according to Kelly, is from a lab leak at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where research was being performed on bat coronaviruses. Earlier this month, the State Council Information Office of the People's Republic of China released a white paper claiming that the United States was trying to shift the blame for the virus to China, even as the Chinese officials accused the United States of potentially being the origin point of the virus. Gabbard said she had not read the white paper, but maintains that the post-mortem on the COVID-19 pandemic is far from over. Gabbard explained, "I created the Directors Initiative group that is focused on investigating a number of the president's top priorities and the things that the American people really deserve and want to know the truth about. The origins of COVID-19 is one of them, and a lot of the work that has been done is on covid.gov. Gabbard has also teamed up with the Director of National Institutes of Health, NIH, Jay Bhattacharya, to find the specific link between gain of function research being done by the Wuhan lab and its partnership with U.S. nonprofit EcoHealth Alliance. If that link can be established, it would directly link Fauci through EcoHealth Alliance to funding the research that gave us COVID-19. This could open up new possibilities of criminal prosecution of Fauci at the state level, as well as the possibility of Biden's autopen-signed pardon being revoked." And I don't know if you've seen, but there's some video out there of those final pardons that came from the autopen. They are all identical. And there are some claims that Biden was incapacitated and not driving the autopen. So then the question becomes, so who did it? Who had anything to gain? Maybe we can talk about that just a little later on. Over at Breitbart.com, leftists cry Islamophobia as France looks to ban veiling of girls over Muslim Brotherhood Sharia plot. This is by Kurt Zindulka. French President Emmanuel Macron's political party has called for a ban on young girls wearing Islamic veils in public and a new law against Islamist entryism after a bombshell government report found that the Muslim Brotherhood has waged a multi-generational campaign to infiltrate institutions and control Islamic communities in service of instituting Sharia law to the West. And I'm just going to pause right there. Because one of the things that we're going to find, and I want you to look for it, is that this has happened in the United States. It's been very clear. We have all the evidence. It stretches all the way back to Huma. And you can find very clearly that the Muslim Brotherhood has been in secondary education and receiving vast sums of funding through the financial auspices of giving monies to higher education. So when we talk about Harvard University suddenly not getting its zillions of dollars, this is an impact. Former French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, who leads President Macron's Renaissance Party in the National Assembly, proposed on Wednesday that the ban on wearing veils in public be extended to girls under the age of 15. France became the first European country to impose such a ban for adults in 2011. However, Attal argued that the government must go further in the wake of the publication of a government report which found that the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood has sought for at least 7 decades to subvert France and other European nations through clandestinely entering institutions and taking control over various facets of Muslim communities to promote Sharia practices to Islamize the West. According to the report, the movement has seized upon supposed social justice campaigns through its various Muslim Association proxies against Islamophobia, a term coined by the Muslim Brotherhood, and the veil ban to create a veneer of legitimacy and public discourse and to rally Muslim communities to their cause. Meanwhile, local arms of the Brotherhood, in which trained Islamist activists are installed as managers at community shops, sports groups, private education, financial services, dating sites, and elsewhere, have been established to control all aspects of life within Islamic communities and enforce strict Muslim practices, such as forcing the veil on women and girls. The report found that this has resulted in a massive and visible increase in little girls wearing the veil, including girls as young as 5 or 6 years old, who are described as the baby lion cubs of radical Islam in France. Thus, the Macronist party has called for fresh legislation to make an offense of coercion to wear the veil against parents who force their minor daughters to wear the veil, which they argue contravenes gender equality and child protection principles, Le Figaro reports. Former Prime Minister Attal has also called for the government to enact a law against Islamist entryism on top of the 2021 legislation banning separatism within the country in response to the subversive threat posed by the Muslim Brotherhood and its proxies, which the government report found have effectively infiltrated EU and French institutions and have turned Western liberalism against itself through campaigns against Islamophobia and supposed victimization of Muslims. Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau warned that there is a very clear threat to the Republic, a threat to national cohesion, and a threat of submersion, adding that the ultimate objective is to tip all of French society into Sharia law. In the wake of the report, the government's National Defense Council plans to intensify efforts to target the finances of groups tied to the Muslim Brotherhood through freezing assets and creating more robust schemes to prevent money from being directed to Islamist causes. However, given that the report found that EU programs often fund the Brotherhood, it is unclear how much France can do unilaterally without Brussels. The report also noted that efforts to disentangle the vast network of Islamist subversion have been put on the back burner of government priorities as a result of the understandable focus on preventing jihadi terrorism, which has plagued the country over the past decade. Additionally, the paper also found that there is a hesitancy to target Muslim Brotherhood-tied groups for fear of appearing Islamophobic. The use of the victim narrative has been critical to the Muslim Brotherhood's success in spreading its influence in Islamic communities and public institutions, the report said. Campaigns against Islamophobia have been a key link between the Islamist factions and the French far left, including socialist Jean-Luc Mélenchon's radical La France Insoumise, the France in Revolt party, which has often joined and helped organize demonstrations against Islamophobia, including a rally in Paris just last month. Mélenchon claimed that the report on the Muslim Brotherhood demonstrated that Islamophobia has crossed a threshold in France and that it merely represented the delusional theories of figures like populist National Rally leader Marine Le Pen and Interior Minister Retailleau. Le Pen deputy Jordan Bardella accused the Mélenchonist party of providing an institutional echo for the Muslim Brotherhood, citing their opposition to the veil ban as evidence of the far left's role as the standard-bearer of the Islamist movement in French politics. On Wednesday, Bardella doubled down on his party's demand that the Muslim Brotherhood be banned outright in the country to protect French people from Islamist threat. There's a lot here to read. There's some links, there's some video over at Breitbart.com. I'll post the link to that story and another one that goes into a greater, deeper dive on the Muslim Brotherhood, about the fifth column that has established itself in Western culture, over on my account at Gab. You can find me at BACFA. LaMonica McIver appears before judge on federal charges, ordered to surrender firearms, cannot leave United States, faces 8 years in prison. This is by Christina Lala over at thegatewaypundit.com. Democrat Representative LaMonica McIver appeared before a judge on Wednesday after the Justice Department charged her with federal crimes for assaulting ICE agents. This is, again, referencing the story that we started the show out with. Representative McIver appeared virtually from D.C. She was released on her own recognizance and did not have to post bail. The judge ordered McIver to surrender her firearms and said she cannot travel outside of the United States. CBS News reported New Jersey Democrat Representative LaMonica McIver appeared virtually before a federal judge in Newark this morning after being charged with assault, resisting arrest, and impeding federal officers. McIver was in Washington for the appearance. She was read her rights and released on her own recognizance. If convicted, faces 8 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. McIver is due to appear in court in person on June 11th for a preliminary hearing. She's allowed to travel domestically and internationally if needed for her congressional duties, the judge said. For personal international travel, she'll need court approval. She was ordered to surrender any firearms she may own. On Monday, U.S. Attorney Alina Habba announced federal charges against Democrat Representative LaMonica McIver for assaulting ICE agents. You can read the criminal complaint through a link that's here. Today, my office has charged Congresswoman McIver with violation of Title 18, United States Code Section 111A1 for assaulting, impeding, and interfering with law enforcement, Alina Habba said on a Monday evening. No one is above the law, politicians or otherwise. ICE body cam footage showing Democrat Representative LaMonica McIver verbally abusing and physically assaulting federal agents at a detention facility in Newark. Representative Monica McIver was seen laying hands on agents during the altercation and chaos. I touch whoever I want, mother McIver shouts. And there's a link from Benny Johnson, who seems to be really lucky with his videos lately. Representative McIver released a statement on Monday evening and said the charges against her are purely political. The New Jersey Democrat also blamed ICE agents for the violent altercation at the Delaney Hall facility. We can get this from multiple angles. Of course, her fellow Democrats think, this is a bridge too far, but they completely forgot that the Biden administration raided Trump's home for papers that he was legally allowed to have as president. So, can they be surprised that there's just a little bit of clapback? Surely their memories aren't that short. visit the Kaiser Family Foundation's Health News website every now and then. It's mostly anti-Trump stuff, but every now and then it has an interesting article that might be worth reading. This one's called This News Might Ruin Your Appetite and Summer by David Hilsenrock. It's a marvel of food technology, ice cream that resists melting. In a video explaining the science behind it, a seller of food chemicals shows scoops of ice cream holding their shape under hot lights. The super ingredient, polysorbate 80. Now, over here on the right-hand side, it says this story also ran on CNN. So, it's endorsed by the most important name in news. Polysorbate 80 is an emulsifier, a chemical used to control the consistency of thousands of supermarket products. Other widely used emulsifiers or stabilizers include carbamexyl cellulose, carrageenan, and maltodextrin. Recently, such ingredients have been showing up in scientific studies for another reason. Researchers say they may cause a variety of health problems. Studies found that emulsifiers can alter the mix of bacteria in the gut, known as the microbiome or microbiota, damage the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, and trigger inflammation, potentially contributing to problems elsewhere in the body. Emulsifiers and stabilizers are among the most common ingredients in ultra-processed foods, a prime target of the Make America Healthy Again campaign by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. They are on the department's radar. Their potentially harmful effects were flagged in a document HHS recently produced to support Kennedy's drive to eliminate petroleum-based food dyes. But they illustrate the complexity of the war on food additives. They show how, when it comes to food science, regulators are chronically playing catch-up. In the meantime, for many ingredients, regulators and consumers alike are left in a gray zone between suspicion and proof of harm in humans. Emulsifiers' assault on the microbiome could help explain inflammatory bowel diseases such as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, metabolic disorders, and even cancer, the studies suggest. There's a lot of data showing that these compounds are really detrimental for the microbiota and that we should stop using them, said Benoit Chassin, a research director at the French National Institute of Health and Medical Research and co-author of several related studies. Yet much larger and more ambitious clinical trials in humans are needed. For Louis Rands, who has suffered from gastrointestinal illness, the research fits his own experience as a consumer. Changing his diet to avoid emulsifiers has made a shocking difference, easing symptoms that were debilitating, Rands said. Clinically, many patients have reported an improvement in symptoms with such changes, said Ashwin Ankathrishkan, a gastroenterologist and researcher at Massachusetts General Hospital. Scientific findings come with caveats. For instance, much of the research has been done in mice or by mimicking the human gut in a tube. There are many unknowns. Not all emulsifiers have bad effects or the same effects, and some people are thought to be more vulnerable than others. Even some researchers who have co-authored papers say that the substances have not been proven harmful to humans and that it's too soon to say regulators should ban them. Still, the research poses a challenge for the FDA. When emulsifiers began spreading through the food supply, the agency wasn't focused on the gut microbiome, a relatively recent scientific frontier, researchers said. Martin Makary, appointed by President Donald Trump to head the FDA, mentioned the microbiome at his Senate confirmation hearing in March. Though he didn't cite emulsifiers specifically or identify chemicals by name, he said substances that affect the microbiome deserve the FDA's attention. There's a body of research now that suggests concern with some of these ingredients, he said. We have to look at those ingredients, and you have my commitment to do so if confirmed as the FDA commissioner. These chemicals are creating an inflammatory response in the gastrointestinal tract, and with an altered microbiome lining that GI tract, kids feel sick, he said. The FDA and Department of Health and Human Services did not respond to questions about Makary's testimony. However, when journalist Emily Kopp asked HHS for the science behind its recent announcement that it's phasing out petroleum-based food dyes, the agency provided a compilation of information on potentially harmful compounds commonly found in ultra-processed foods. The document, which appeared to be a draft, included a section on emulsifiers, such as xanthan gum and carrageenan. It noted that the section needed more work. HHS subsequently provided the document to KFF Health News. As far back as 2020, an international organization for the study of inflammatory bowel diseases advised that for people with certain conditions, it may be prudent to limit intake of maltodextrin, carrageenan, carboxylmethylcellulose, and polysorbate 80. Emulsifiers are developed from a variety of sources, including plants and bacteria. Some ingredients that might affect the microbiome show up in foods because they were deemed generally recognized as safe, or GRAS. New information may at any time require consideration of the GRAS status of a food ingredient, the Code of Federal Regulations say. There's more here to read if you want to check it out over at kffhealthnews.org. I can tell you this. I believe in yogurt, making your own yogurt and adding some really good stuff to it. If you want my recipe, you can check out the link over there on Gab. You can change your gut in just a couple of weeks with some tweaks to your intake. This story is RFK Jr. calls WHO moribund amid U.S. withdrawal. China pledges to give $500 million, which, honestly, that really tells you what the World Health Organization is all about. And in the wake of 2020 and COVID-19, just underscores just where that organization has drifted to. This is by Beth Mole. China is poised to be the next big donor to the World Health Organization after Trump abruptly withdrew the U.S. from the United Nations Health Agency on his first day in office, leaving a critical funding gap and leadership void. On Tuesday, Chinese Vice Premier Liu Gonzong said that China would give an additional $500 million to the WHO over the course of 5 years. Liu made the announcement at the World Health Assembly being held in Geneva. The Assembly is the decision-making body of the World Health Organization, comprised of delegations from member states, which meet annually to guide the agency's health agenda. The world is now facing the impacts of unilateralism and power politics, bringing major challenges to global health security, Liu told the Assembly, according to the Washington Post. China strongly believes that only with solidarity and mutual assistance can we create a healthy world together. This year, China sent its largest ever delegation, 180, to the Assembly, while the United States was absent, according to Health Policy Watch. The increased involvement and large donation are seen as clear examples that China is working to take the place of the United States. Although the United States has cut all ties with the World Health Organization and reportedly still owes the agency $260 million in 2024-2025 dues, U.S. Health Secretary and anti-vaccine advocate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made an unexpected appearance at the Assembly via a 6-minute video. In the abrasive, pre-recorded speech, Kennedy described the World Health Organization as moribund and mired in bureaucratic bloat and entrenched paradigms. The World Health Organization's priorities have increasingly reflected the biases and interests of corporate medicine, Kennedy said, and alluding to his anti-vaccine and germ theory denialist views. He chastised the health organization for allegedly capitulating to China and working with the country to promote the fiction that COVID originated in bats. Kennedy ended the short speech by touting his Make America Healthy Again agenda. He also urged the World Health Organization to undergo a radical overhaul similar to what Trump administration is currently doing to the United States government, presumably including dismantling and withholding funding from critical health agencies and programs. Last year, he pitched other countries to join the United States in abandoning the World Health Organization. I would like to take this opportunity to invite my fellow health ministers around the world into a new era of cooperation. We're ready to work with you, Kennedy said. Meanwhile, the Assembly embraced collaboration. During the Assembly this week, World Health Organization overwhelmingly voted to adopt the world's first pandemic treaty aimed at collectively preventing, preparing for, and responding to any future pandemics. The treaty took over 3 years to negotiate, but in the end, no country voted against it. 124 votes in favor, 11 abstentions, and no objections. The U.S., no longer being a member of the World Health Organization, did not have a vote. The world is safer today thanks to the leadership, collaboration, and commitment of our member states to adopt the historic World Health Organization Pandemic Agreement, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said. The agreement is a victory for public health, science, and multilateral action. It will ensure we, collectively, can better protect the world from future pandemic threats. It is also a recognition by the international community that our citizens, societies, and economies must not be left vulnerable to again suffer losses like those endured during COVID-19. Sounds a lot like I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And it also sounds, they don't want to say it too loudly, but clearly this is world domination at its easiest. We're going to scare you into compliance, and you're going to trade a little bit of your freedom for all of your security. And then where will you be? Unable to vote yourself out of slavery. I think there's a lot of speculation about, well, how do they get away with it? It's because they have an entire organization funded to make sure that they are successful so that they can then protect all those underneath. And you know who I'm talking about in these prior administrations. Over at nypost.com, Betsy McCaughey had an opinion piece called How Shady Democratic Party Lawyer Mark Elias is Throwing Voters' Will. A left-wing legal group with deceptive name is proving to be the biggest obstacle in translating President Donald Trump's massive 2020 election victory into real change. The mission of Democracy Forward, thwarting the choices of 77 million voters who supported Trump for president. The group sues the Trump administration repeatedly, venue shopping for sympathetic district court judges, the lowest federal jurists on the totem pole, who then act as stooges, issuing national injunctions to halt Trump's agenda. Never mind how flimsy or outright false the legal claims. Brain behind Democracy Forward is the scandal-plagued Democrat lawyer Mark Elias, who chairs the group. He's the same culprit whose fingerprints were all over the fake anti-Trump Steele dossier in 2016, launching the Russia collusion narrative. Elias was also behind the state-by-state changes in election law intended to tilt the scales against Republicans in 2020. On Friday, Democracy Forward struck again as U.S. District Judge Susan Ilston in San Francisco issued an order suspending Trump's plans to shrink 21 federal departments and agencies, everything from the Departments of Energy, Commerce, and Labor to the Social Security Administration, the Small Business Administration, and the National Science Foundation. In terms of sheer size, this is the most consequential nationwide injunction slapped on Trump yet. Democracy Forward claims to be upholding democracy itself. As the website declares, at this critical moment, when those who are responsible for January 6th have returned to power, we must use the law to defend our democracy and build for a better future. That's where there's a big lie. The insidious suggestion that Trump returned to power through some illicit coup. Truth is, he was elected by huge popular and electoral college majorities. Candidate Trump's winning agenda included pledges to drain the federal swamp, shrink the size and cost of government, and eliminate 10 regulations for every new one slapped on the public. All those goals are fatal to the interest groups and unions that feed at the trough of an ever bigger government, and that's who Democracy Forward is fighting to protect in Judge Ilston's court. The judge insists her ruling is intended to protect the powers of the legislative branch. She argues the president must consult with Congress to make large-scale overhauls of federal agencies. Many previous presidents have consulted Congress in such instances, and Ilston pointed to language in the U.S. Code saying that the president shall submit reorganization plans to Congress. But it's a weak argument. Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution puts the president exclusively in charge of the executive branch, and any statute that impinges on that authority may be unconstitutional in and of itself. That's how 2 higher federal judges and courts in other parts of the country have ruled, but Ilston says she's not bound by other circuits' decisions. Yet Ilston's argument reads like a mere pretext, not a sincere attempt to protect Congress. After all, Congress isn't suing to seek the judge's protection. Look who is suing. the nation's 4 largest public employee unions, including the American Federation of Government Employees and the Service Employees International Union, despairing that Trump's layoffs will cut into the dues they collect and mean more work for members still on the job. This is a lawsuit to protect the gravy train. Joining the lawsuit are Democrat-run cities and states. Where will their funding come from, they cry. The city of Baltimore contends that when its federal employees are laid off, the city collects less tax revenue, as if the layoffs would keep Baltimore residents from finding work in the private sector. The gist of the argument is this: the federal government must only get bigger, never smaller. It's crazy. In March, Democracy Forward launched a similar lawsuit to stop Trump's reorganization of the Department of Education, with Randy Weingarten's American Federation of Teachers as the lead plaintiff. As part of her plea, Weingarten whined that Trump's plan would funnel education funding directly to the states, possibly resulting in tax dollars funding private school vouchers. Sorry, Randy, that's an issue that should be decided by elections, not lawsuits. Democracy Forward CEO Skye Perryman has boasted that long before Trump's victory, the group created a spreadsheet of his likely policies and plotted legal actions against each one. Seeking national injunctions has been their most corrupt weapon. But this week, their strategy could hit a brick wall. On Thursday, the Supreme Court will hear arguments in a case on Trump's birthright citizenship policy, when the justices are expected to slap urgently needed limits on injunction-happy district court judges. Not a minute too soon, limiting national injunctions will rein in left-wing litigation complex and handcuff Elias. Don't let the name of his latest operation fool you. Democracy Forward is really Democracy Undone, a planned assault on your right to choose. That's over at nypost.com. I often remind people that we're 25 years behind, at least, what the military wing is using, and I say at least, it's sort of like this Golden Dome stuff. Hello, what do you mean it might bring war to space? We're already there. We've been there. It's been going on. So it's more about revealing it to the masses and preparing them mentally for what is already the case. So when I saw this article over at arstechnica.com, it piqued a little bit of my interest. Scientists figure out how the brain forms emotional connections. Neural recordings track how neurons link environments to emotional events. I think about this in terms of imprinting. This is by Jacek Kwykwo. Whenever something bad happens to us, brain systems responsible for mediating emotions kick in to prevent it from happening again. When we get stung by a wasp, the association between pain and wasps is encoded in the region of the brain called the amygdala, which connects simple stimuli with basic emotions. But the brain does more than simple associations. It also encodes lots of other stimuli that are less directly connected with the harmful event. Things like the place where we got stung or the wasp's nests in a nearby tree. These are combined into complex emotional models of potentially threatening circumstances. Till now, we didn't know exactly how these models are built, but we're beginning to understand how it's done. Decades of work has revealed how simple forms of emotional learning occurs, how sensory stimuli are paired with aversive events, says Joshua Johansson, a team director at the Neural Circuitry of Learning and Memory at Riken Center for Brain Science in Tokyo. But Johansson says that these decades didn't bring much progress in treating psychiatric conditions like anxiety and trauma-related disorders. We thought if we could get a handle of more complex emotional processes and understand their mechanisms, we might be able to provide relief for patients with conditions like that, Johansson claims. To make it happen, this team performed experiments designed to trigger complex emotional processes in rats while closely monitoring their brains. Johansson and Zhu-Wei Gu, his co-author and colleague at Riken, started by dividing the rats into 2 groups. The first paired group of rats was conditioned to associate an image with a sound. The second unpaired group watched the same image and listened to the same sound, but not at the same time. This prevented the rats from making an association. Then 1 day later, the rats were shown the same image and treated with an electric shock until they learned to connect the image with pain. Finally, the team tested if the rats would freeze in fear in response to the sound. The unpaired group didn't. The rats in the paired group did. It turned out human-like complex emotional models were present in the rats as well. Once Johansson and Gu confirmed the capacity was there, they got busy figuring out how it worked exactly. Behaviorally, we measured freezing responses to the directly paired stimulus, which was the image, and inferred stimulus, which was the sound, Johansson said. But we also performed something we called miniscope calcium imaging. The trick relied on injecting rats with a virus that forced their cells to produce proteins that fluoresce in response to increased levels of calcium in the cells. Increased levels of calcium are the telltale sign of activity in neurons, meaning the team could see in real time which neurons in rat brains lit up during the experiments. It turned out that the region crucial for building these complex emotional models was not the amygdala, but the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, which had a rather specialized role. The DMPFC does not form the sensory model of the world. It only cares about things when they have emotional relevance, Johansson explains. He said there wasn't much change in neuronal activity during the sensory learning phase when the animals were watching the image and listening to the sound. The neurons became significantly more active when the rats received the electric shock. In the unpaired group, the active neurons that held the representative electric shock and image started to overlap. In the paired group, this overlap included the neuronal representation of the sound. This was kind of like an associative bundle that formed, Johansson said. After Johansson and Gu pinpointed the neurons that formed these associative bundles, they started looking at how each of these components worked. The article goes into great detail into how this is stored in the brain, and you can imagine how this might be weaponized. I'm sure you can think of how it probably already is weaponized in everyday ways. I would encourage you to come have a look at this article at Ars Technica and give it a good think. I wanted to point out a few more articles. I guess I had more material than I had time this week. Over at Blaze Media, theblaze.com, South African president denies white genocide, then Trump shoves proof in his face by Joseph McKinnon. Just one of a slew of articles about the sort of tackle approach of playing video evidence in front of a world leader while they're sitting on the buttercream chairs, and absolutely calling him on, where are these white crosses? As if they have no idea that the world is watching. It's really quite amazing. Over here at redstate.com, Banshee had this article. Jake Tapper confirms who was controlling Biden, and it's absolutely scandalous. My thoughts about Jake Tapper holding all the information in his book until after the election aside, there have been some very damning revelations about Joe Biden's health and those who covered it up. At very least, getting Democrats to admit that what those of us in conservative media have been saying for years holds value. Tapper has also gone on the record to apologize to Lara Trump, for example, after he previously scorned her for pointing out Biden's obvious mental failings. With that said, I'm going to try to put aside my feelings on the CNN host's obvious attempt to cover his own backside for a moment and instead focus on what he's saying, which leads me to the biggest question surrounding everything we've learned over the past several weeks of new notes and sourcing. Who was in charge? The answer? Hunter Biden was essentially the president. Why? You'll have to come look at this article at redstate.com. Well, now, who had what to benefit? I mean, clearly someone needed cover so that they would never be pursued with charges again. I also wanted to point out this article over at The Register. Greater Manchester says its NHS analytics stack is years ahead of Palantir wares. Care Board draws red lines over use of UK government-backed federated data platform. Now, many of you are like, why would you even cover this? What's the big deal? Knowing who is behind the data stores and the artificial intelligence and how things get run automatically for those in power is very important to all of us. The listening ear and the all-seeing eye are at play. Also, over at TheVerge.com, are character AI's chatbots predict speech? One court isn't sure a judge is not prepared to say companion chatbots should receive First Amendment protection. I think that's pretty obvious. It's an algorithm. It doesn't have a mind of its own. It's not a person. It's not a citizen. It doesn't get to be classed as a person. That's what this article over at The Verge is about. I encourage you to come have a look at the quandary that these leftist judges and others find themselves in as they pretend and project that life exists in the digital realm. It's a robot. It's not alive. Also over at the Register, Google carves out cloudy safe spaces for nations nervous about America's reach. We've talked about this ad nauseum in the past about how Google has gone abroad to build Monarch for China and other things, and they have worked their way outside of the realms of American justice and American law and American norms while still taking benefits from being based in the States. So they need to pick their sides here, parking data elsewhere to make others feel more comfortable so that the Department of Defense can't get in there is, well, it needs to choose a side. These sorts of things are going to find Google in a lot of hot water. Toot sweet. And then finally, I wanted to share with you this article. We're talking about technology, also from Ars Technica. Chicago Sun-Times prints summer reading list full of fake books by Ben Jedwards. On Sunday, the Chicago Sun-Times published an advertorial summer reading list containing at least 10 fake books attributed to real authors, according to multiple reports on social media. The newspaper's uncredited summer reading list for 2025 supplement recommended titles including Tidewater Dreams by Isabel Allende and The Last Algorithm by Andy Weir, books that don't exist and were created out of thin air by an AI system. The creator of the list, Marco Buscaglia, confirmed to 404 Media that he used AI to generate the content. I do use AI for background at times, but always check out the material first. This time I did not, and I can't believe I missed it. Because it's so obvious. No excuses, Buscaglia said. On me 100%, and I'm completely embarrassed. A check by Ars Technica shows that only 5 of the 15 recommended books in the list actually exist, with the remainder being fabricated titles falsely attributed to well-known authors. AI assistants, such as ChatGPT, are well known for creating plausible-sounding errors such as confabulations like this, especially when lacking detailed information on a particular topic. The problem affects everything from AI search results to lawyers citing fake cases. On Tuesday, the Sun-Times addressed the controversy on Blue Sky. We are looking into how this made it into print as we speak. The official publication account wrote, "It is not editorial content and was not created by or approved by the Sun-Times newsroom. We value your trust in our reporting and take this very seriously. More info will be provided soon." In the supplement, the books listed by the authors Isabel Allende, Andy Weir, Britt Bennett, Taylor Jenkins Reid, Min Jin Lee, Percival Everett, Delia Owens, and more are real. All of the authors are real people. And it's got an image here of that reading list. I would encourage you to read other things that you know are true. You know what I'm talking about. People have had their lives completely changed by submersing themselves in the truth on a daily basis. You know where to find it. Join me again next week for another episode of Atomic Biscuits, and have a wonderful week. See you.
Thanks for joining us for Atomic Biscuits. Tune in again next week for more news and music. Check out BACFA on Gab at BACFA, as well as Bitchute, Rumble, D-Live and Odysee. Check out LastScoutRadio.com for fun content. Listen to WBN 324 on radio stations around the world, on many streaming platforms, and World Broadcasting Network WBN 324.zil.